In the recent decade, we have seen a polarizing cultural trend in the league. Some players like Sidney Crosby or Cale Makar are not only the perfect leaders or mentors, but they are so selfless that they would sacrifice upwards of $4 million per season in order to give their teams a much needed advantage when it comes to constructing depth up and down the lineup. To put this into perspective, if we combine the total value of Makar and Crosby's contract, it equals $71.4 million. Darnell Nurse's contract is worth $74 million. Honestly, there's just nothing else to say here. But on the other hand, we have a player like Igor Shesterkin, who was reportedly offered the biggest goalie contract in NHL history, but he would reject it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm by no means comparing Shesterkin to Darnell Nurse, but the difference between a Makar and Crosby versus Shesterkin is obvious. But the immense culture a team has to have for a player to pass on making an additional $18 million or 25 million Canadian for the case of Makar is astonishing. Now, contracts are one thing. Another trend we've been seeing is loyalty issues. Star players like Pierre-Luc Dubois, bouncing around teams like me mashing the keyboard on that Windows pinball game. Adam Fox, utilizing the NCAA clause, which allows him to go straight to free agency, leading to Fox to pass on not one, but two NHL teams, only to break their hearts by becoming a top defenseman in the game.
The power play, Fox makes it 2, and he scores!
Cutter Gauthier, after nearly scoring at a goal per game rate in the NCAA,
A steal and a break up ice. Gauthier, and he shoots and scores!
was not interested in signing with the Flyers, which would lead to the quote, "If you don't want to be a Flyer, you're not going to be a Flyer," which would then lead to a massive trade to the Anaheim Ducks. The Winnipeg Jets, sensing that McGrody was about to do the same thing, would instead swap him with Braden Yeager. Because here's the thing, the NHL ranks among the top leagues in the world of any sport when it comes to parity. Thus, it is now mandatory for GMs to have surgical precision with every trade, every signing, every draft pick, as one horrible contract can lead to a team falling apart by losing a bunch of depth players. But on the other hand, one amazing contract can create Stanley Cup winning depth. However, what if I were to tell you that the Winnipeg Jets have arguably faced every single thing I just mentioned more than any other team in the NHL? Yet, this team is on top of the league, firing on all cylinders, on the cusp of having the best start to a season in NHL history. So then it begs the question, what in the hell is going on? And well, the answer might shock you. This past season, The Athletic would conduct an anonymous survey, polling NHL players on a bunch of different topics. And I personally love The Athletic polls because unlike the NHLPA, they are not afraid to ask some hard-hitting questions. Who's the most overrated player? Trevor Zegras and Darnell Nurse. Who do you most want to punch in the face? No, it's not Brad Marchand. It's the new Rat King, Nick Cousins.
You'll definitely have a penalty called or two here, I would think, as Cousins took a hit up.
What is the best road city in the NHL? By no surprise, Las Vegas and New York take it by a large margin. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, what is your least favorite place to play? Now, obviously Winnipeg is near the top right, but we also hear fans chirping places like Columbus or Edmonton, maybe the fact that Ottawa plays in a suburb. Yet, the Winnipeg Jets blow the doors off this entire poll, as they would amass over 41% of all votes. Now, with these types of polls, other than who's the best player, Connor McDavid, we don't see one place or player usually dominate the polls. So to take on 41% of all votes is absurd. And don't get me wrong, I personally love Winnipeg. I had family growing up there and spent a lot of my life in Kenora, which is just inside the Ontario border beside Winnipeg. But I guess in a league where you can play in Vancouver, Montreal, California, just some of the nicest places in the world, it shouldn't be too surprising that players rank Winnipeg near the bottom. Now, consider this. During the infamous 2005 NHL lockout, not only would it lead to several history-altering rulings like the salary cap, the shootout,
Here is Kucherov cutting in, and he scores! No, he didn't just do that.
instigator rule that would cause a massive drop in fights per season, but we would also see the implementation of the no-trade clause, a clause that allows players when negotiating their contracts to create a list of teams that their team is not allowed to trade them to. Again, this is not my words, I'm not trying to disrespect the great people of Winnipeg, but without a doubt, most if not literally 95% of players will include Winnipeg on their no-trade clause. There is no data on this, but from every single leaked no-trade clause I've ever seen, Winnipeg always makes an appearance. Now, think about this. Winnipeg is a team who rarely makes a big splash at the trade deadline. Why, you ask? Lots of teams who go out and acquire a piece to push them into contention know at the back of their head that there's a reasonable chance that they can retain that player. Think about Tampa Bay. In the last several years, Winnipeg would go out and acquire some star power into Foley, Sean Monahan, yet all of them would walk. Therefore, how could Winnipeg possibly assemble a team this year that just had the record for the greatest start to an NHL season? And well, the Winnipeg Jets basically have two options. 1. Ensure that their pro scouts do their due diligence when acquiring players via trade, basically ensuring that they are acquiring the type of player who will live in Winnipeg long term. As we saw this with a player like Niederreiter.
Appleton a little drop, Niederreiter, and he scores.
Or Gabe Vilardi, who views Winnipeg as a team who can reignite his unfortunate career.
Oh, in front, and what a goal! Vilardi went through the legs and upstairs. How do you stop that?
Or number 2, draft. If we look at this roster, all of their star players, whether they're forwards, defensemen, or a Vezina winning goalie, were drafted and developed by Winnipeg.
Hellebuck made the save! Hellebuck got a stick on it!
Because unlike other teams like the New York Rangers, who have the ability to build their team through free agency with signings like, Artemi Panarin, or perhaps Stamkos in Nashville, Tavares in Toronto, Winnipeg just doesn't have this ability, as their roster has virtually no players who were signed from free agency. Now, of course, they can always intrigue some bottom 6 players, but relative to every single other NHL team, Winnipeg's roster was constructed solely on high-end scouting and through the draft. And this right here is key. This right here is why Winnipeg has always been viewed as a surprise in the standings, and to why they have shocked the hockey world this season. Because I have a theory that might just change your entire perspective on the league.
It's a new season, here we go. But as a fan, you're like, Jesus, I remember that series against Colorado, and it was nothing like we saw Winnipeg play like in the regular season. So that's why I'm not picking them to get in, and I would be happy to eat my words again on that one.
The fraud squad.
In the last several seasons, I've seen many fans or analysts report that Winnipeg, well, they're just not a playoff team, as they have been more times than not ranked outside the playoffs or right on the bubble. Yet, time and time again, they have gone against the odds and have had great seasons. So, why, Rob? Why? Get to the point. Well, I've had a theory for the past couple years that I'm now thinking is just a fact. I believe that Winnipeg punches above their expectations because of the sole fact that because they play in Winnipeg, which is seen as undesirable by most players, this fact alone will instantly allow the Jets to weed out players who don't want to be there. Think about the optics here. Yes, I get that some players may want to be closer to their family, or just have places in their mind where they would prefer to play. But if you're an NHL player with career earnings of $50, $100 million, and are unwilling to play for certain teams, I can guarantee you that there's a great overlap between those players and the players who are toxic. Think about it this way. Erik Karlsson would sign a monster $11.5 million deal with the Sharks. In Canadian dollars, that's just, $16 million per season. Erik Karlsson on a per hour basis makes about $10,000 per hour. $10,000 per hour. You heard that right. And Erik Karlsson, well, he didn't like living in one of the nicest places in the world because the team was losing, and got traded to the Penguins. And the guy has been a defensive liability, basically single-handedly ruined the cap construction of the entire Penguins franchise. Do you think that a player like Erik Karlsson would accept a trade to Winnipeg? Hell no. I'm not saying that Karlsson is toxic, but the fact that Winnipeg is Winnipeg automatically removes them from ever encountering an Erik Karlsson situation. So we're talking the ones that disrupt team culture, the ones who cause drama, and the ones who are unwilling to play a system game. So unless Winnipeg drafts those players, because they are so selective over the players they do acquire, those players, they just don't exist on this team. And in the rare occasion where they do show up, Winnipeg makes great trades. Just think about what we saw from Dubois or McGroarty. Because most players don't want to play in Winnipeg, the players who do want to play there really want to play there. Do you see what I'm getting at here? And when a player really wants to play in a city, they are more likely to take those team-friendly deals. Because, and I kid you not, Winnipeg relative to other markets like Toronto or Vancouver, arguably has some of the best contracts in the league. Mark Scheifele for $8.5 million is a bargain.
Stays on the ice, breaking in Scheifele, and he scores!
A 6'3" gritty point per game center could easily command upwards of 10, 11 million in free agency. Kyle Connor for 7 million is just gross.
Connor in off the left. Kyle Connor to the backhand. Scores!
Yes, he's dealt with injuries, but the man is a couple years removed from a 50-goal season. He could again easily commanded over $10 million in free agency. Josh Morrissey has broken out as a true number one defenseman and is locked up for $6.25 million.
Morrissey charging, trying to pull away from Robertson. He does. He scores! Josh Morrissey wins it for the Jets.
And is making what, 2, 3, 4 less million than his market value? Connor Hellebuyck has consistently been a top goalie in this league. And somehow, I never hear his name in the top goalie discussion, even though he's a 2-time Vezina winner who's making 1 to 3 less million than other proven stars when compared to Bobrovsky or the rumored contract of Shesterkin. So we're talking about Canadian taxes in a city where most players don't want to play. They are locking up players on contracts only comparable to those of Florida, Vegas, and Tampa, places with perfect weather, if not a paradise, on top of no state tax. As somehow, Winnipeg being an undesirable city, which has the horrible downside of not attracting stars, has also led to the upside of them as a franchise, instantly knowing who wants to be there and who doesn't. So when you know that every player on your roster wants to be there, show up for the team, for the city, the fans of Winnipeg, guess what happens? That team, without a doubt, have some of the best culture in the league. I would really appreciate you if you left a like on this video, and as always, thanks for watching.